Hello, welcome. I'm Brett Premack, and today I'm joined by Howard Mantle, president of the Jazz Journalists Association, for a talk about the Jazz Awards, the 2015 JJA Jazz Awards were just announced this week, and we're going to talk a little bit about the awards and the nominations. So joining us from Chicago, Howard Mantle. Good afternoon, Howard.
Hi, Brett. How you doing?
I'm good. Howard, why did you start the Jazz Journalists Association?
Well, I was not alone in starting it. There was a feeling in the 1980s that we had a lot of issues in common and that it would be good to network amongst the people who were writing about music, writing about jazz, photographing it, broadcasting it. And we wanted to see if we could get together both on a social basis and a professional basis and keep our eyes on what was going on in journalism and have a service organization for those of us who are working in that field.
And when did the Jazz Awards start?
Jazz Awards started in 1996, and that came about through Michael Dorf's initiative, actually. He had proposed that we have a awards program. He actually proposed it to Gene Santoro, and Gene found that it was not something that he could devote time to. But the JJA thought, yes, this is appropriate for us. This is what jazz journalists traditionally do, participate in polls and do things to try to raise the presence of musicians in general and acknowledge excellence. So we took it on.
Well, one aspect of the Jazz Awards, which really jumps out at me here, are the Jazz Heroes. Could you talk about why you wanted to include Jazz Heroes? And before we get into this year's heroes, who have been some past heroes?
Oh, gosh, it's been everybody from the people who started the Jazz Foundation of America to saxophone repairmen, well-known in Boston, many educators, community activists who supported jazz. We used to call this the JJA's A-team, for activists, advocates, altruists, aiders, and abettors of jazz. At that point, we were conferring these awards on the basis of a committee of JJA members deciding who deserved them. And then we decided to consult with local activists in communities all over the country and urge them to celebrate their heroes. And so that's been going on, that program, for I think it's 4 years now. And so we've activated this year 22 cities in the U.S. to nominate and celebrate 24 heroes. And they have parties, they reach out to local political officials to create proclamations. We try to do it as a way for local communities to have something that they can participate in during Jazz Appreciation Month and use media, learn how to use their media connections locally, hopefully to use them all year long, but to activate them definitely during Jazz Appreciation Month leading up to International Jazz Day, since those are two big tentpole events that ought to perk up local media that wouldn't necessarily cover jazz normally.
And who are some of this year's Jazz Heroes, Howard?
Well, I don't have them all memorized, but they are visible at jjajazzawards.com. And
.org.
I think that I think it's
resolved to that, because I'm looking at jjawards.org.
I think we have both, actually. Let me see. But Sunday, no, you're right. It's .org. Sunday, Tatsu Aoki, a Chicago jazz hero, bassist who is also teacher at the Art Institute of Chicago and has contributed to music and bridging the gaps in music between the Asian American community, the blues community, the avant-garde community, and the straight-ahead communities in Chicago. So he's one of the people that we're very excited about. Another one is Kim Clark, she's a bassist, but she's getting this award for producing the Lady Got Chops Festival in New York City for the last 13 years, which she does on a shoestring. And they have performances led by women musicians all over the 5 boroughs of New York City. So that's a good thing too, we think. We have 24 of them. There are a couple guys in Memphis who done great things to try to promote jazz there. In Madison, Wisconsin, a man named Howard Landsman, who's been like a sort of a one-man leader activist to get the jazz community going there, and he's done a good job last 25 years. In New Jersey, Virginia DeBerry, Central New Jersey, this is New Brunswick, and she's been a driving force in the New Brunswick Jazz Society, and so on. People all over the country.
Well, I'm really glad you're doing this. I think it's important to first of all involve people outside of New York City, all over the country, and the world, and this music, and let's give people some love, some recognition for their contributions.
Absolutely.
So once again, jjjawards.org for a complete list of the jazz heroes and the nominations. Let's get to the 2015 nominees for music and recording awards. First of all, how do you determine the nominees?
Well, the JJA professional members, that is the journalists who are broadcasters, writers, photographers, videographers, new media professionals, vote. We asked them for nominees, 3 nominees in each of the categories. I think there were 42 categories this year. We scotched 3 of the categories because of very inconclusive nomination returns. But the other 39 categories, we take the nominations, and these just come off, from the background of the members. We don't force nominees on them. We don't suggest who the nominees should be. We do try to have a members-only discussion on Facebook about who would be suitable nominees. But everybody nominates on their own, from their own lights. And then we tabulate, and whoever got the most nominations in each category, the top 3, or sometimes because of ties, 5 or even 6, become the finalists. And then we have a second round of voting that on those finalists.
Okay, we're not going to go through
now.
Okay, we're not going to go through every category here because there are, but let's talk about some of the major ones. First of all, lifetime achievement in jazz. This year, 3 of our most noted jazz creators: Charles Lloyd, Chick Corea, and Randy Weston.
Right.
Who are some of the people who have received, because we look at this list, someone who's new to this might say, what about so-and-so? How many Lifetime Achievement Awards have been presented in the past, and who are some of those folks?
I think there have been 18 so far. Ornette Coleman, Cecil Taylor, Jimmy Heath, Sonny Rollins. You're asking me tough questions I haven't studied up on. But these also can be discovered at jjjazzawards.org. Let me think. Lifetime achievement.
Howard, let me ask you this.
Roy Haynes, Elvin Jones. Go ahead.
What is a Lifetime Achievement Award? Is that paying tribute to a jazz musician's contributions to the music, or exactly what do you think is the criteria for that?
Yes, I think we're talking about major artists who've had huge influence and just incredible impact, and have had, again, a lifetime of work that's been recognized, and that everybody says this is we just have to applaud this. Herbie Hancock won last year. There's no unknowns who get these awards.
Yeah. Now, jumping over to Musician of the Year, this is very interesting this year because we have a multi-generational thing going on here. Ambrose, what's the best way to pronounce his name? I'm terrible at that.
I say Akin Masur. I'm not sure what he says.
Okay.
Ambrose Akin Masur.
Okay, well, if I'm not mistaken, he's in his late 20s. Jason Moran's got to be approaching 40, and Chick is just on the other side of 70.
Yeah, That's amazing. But they've all got high profiles. They've been very active, touring the country, putting out records. In the case of Jason at the Kennedy Center, really driving some very highly visible programming. And his All Rise record, his Fats Waller tribute, both have gotten a lot of attention in the last year and a half or so.
Now, the up-and-coming artist of the year is a fascinating category because perhaps people have not heard of these particular artists. So I wonder if you could say a few words about each. Warren Wolf.
Warren Wolf's a fine Baltimore-based, I think originally vibist, and I've seen him perform at Bohemian Caverns in D.C., kind of a post-bop or hard bop playing vibist, very deft. Percussive, solid idea for somebody who's up and coming. I think he's got, what, 2 or 3 records of his own, and he's been a sideman on numerous records also.
Yeah, the thing a lot of people don't know about Warren Wolf is that he's a multi-instrumentist as well. I saw him several years ago at the Mid-Atlantic Jazz Festival. He started on the vibes, he moved over to the drums, he played the bass, and he played the piano as well. He's a very, very, very talented cat.
I didn't know that.
Speaking of talented people, last year's winner of the Monk competition, Melissa Aldana.
Tenor saxophonist, very warm, beautiful sound. I heard her at the Winter Jazz Fest, not this year, but last year, and she's gotten a lot of attention. I mean, there's a premium right now, I think, on focusing on women instrumentalists. There is a audience that is emerging that wants to hear women instrumentalists, and there are a lot of women instrumentalists who've been freed from what had seemed to be limitations on which instruments have been appropriate for them, and so we're seeing more people in those categories. And Melissa is somebody who's been very well received. I should say she's not the only tenor saxophonist, woman tenor saxophonist who's bopped onto the scene in the last couple of years. I mean, Ingrid Laubach is another one. There are several others. This is a coming trend. There's more integration of women, I think, into major instrumental frontline categories, and also in support roles, bassists, drummers, you know.
Absolutely. Now, here's a gentleman who I am unfamiliar with, David Vareles.
David Vareles is a pianist, I guess from Cuban origins. He's made, I think, 2 records on Pi recordings. I heard him most recently in Henry Threadgill's Double Up band. Again, you know, there's a lot of great talent, especially from keyboardists, pianists who come out of Cuba, and David seems to be one of the leading lights. A lot of people are in his corner, and I haven't heard him as much as I'd like to. I think I've seen him twice with Threadgill, and I've heard his records on Pi, but I haven't seen him lead a ensemble of his own yet.
Well, we'll definitely have to check him out. And then next on the list is a wonderful vocalist. I heard her on a recording this year with Archie Shepp, his revisiting of Attica Blues. I Hear the Sound did in Paris. And Cecile McLaurin Salvant, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, is a vocalist on there.
I love her singing. I saw her a couple years ago after reading some buzz about her, and I'm hard on vocalists. I'm not a huge, I don't just love every vocalist that comes down the pike, but I thought I've got to see her because people are screaming, raving about her, and I went to see her at the Charlie Parker Festival in New York City, and as soon as she stepped on the stage, I went, oh my God, she really is fantastic. She's just one of these people who so clearly has the jazz spirit and genius of it. And her music, it makes me grin. I mean, she won an award last year because, and maybe it was up and coming, no, I think it was female vocalist, because I presented that at Lincoln Center to her. And again, it was just thrilling. She's got such wonderful spirit. This is somebody we can hope will have a long career in jazz because she's going to really inspire a lot of people and please a lot of people. It's great stuff.
Absolutely. And our fifth up-and-coming artist is the trumpeter and composer Ambrose Akinmisare. He's actually been around for a little bit while. Pardon me. He teaches at USC in the jazz program that Bob Mintzer runs. And if I'm not mistaken, he's had a couple of Blue Note releases.
I think he just has his second. I think the up and coming is restricted to people who've only had 3 or less records under their own name. So I think he's just put out his, or last year, put out his second on Blue Note.
Well, speaking of records, Howard and I are veterans of a long ago time when there were major record labels and something called LPs. We've seen the evolution of that in our lifetime. And as we come to the Record of the Year category, although the disappearance of the major labels for the most part no longer finds us with a lot of well-funded projects, there are crowd-funded projects with Kickstarter and other up-and-coming artists releasing a lot of CDs, a lot of recordings, a lot of files, whatever format it is. How did you narrow it down this year to just 3 records, Howard?
Well, again, this is not my doing. This is the membership's doing. So this is what people voted for. This is where most of the votes accrued. And in these situations, let's see, the nominees are, let me get to it, Jason Moran's All Rise, that Kenny Barron, Dave Holland, The Art of Conversation, and The Bad Plus is The Rite of Spring. And they got the lion's share of nominations from the membership. After these 3, I mean, there are many nominations made that the public does not see. You know, votes can be 1, 2, 3, maybe get 6, maybe get 8. But here we've got nominations that are topping 20, 25 nominations altogether. So they were clearly in the lead of any of the records that were mentioned.
Well, it's interesting that they're all on, I mentioned the disappearance of major labels, but there's still some activity. Jason is on Blue Note, Kenny and Dave are on Impulse, and The Bad Plus is on Sony Music. Do you think that although there is this wave of artists producing recordings independently, the fact that they cannot do the kind of promotion necessary puts them kind of a little further down in the standings?
Yes, I think that does happen. I mean, really, the records and the artists too, the nominations come from exposure. And for instance, I have not heard that Dave Holland, Kenny Barron record. Impulse is not servicing me. I haven't gone out and tried that one. And it's one I'd like to listen to. So I guess I should go on Spotify or something and find it and stream it and, you know, check it out. Or run to the record store. Today is record store day, isn't it? So, you know, that would be something I could go to the Jazz Record Mart downtown, and if my lady friend would allow me to shop there, because I'll come back with $500, $600 worth of CDs, and you know, it's probably not too practical. But I think that the promotion by the major record labels does bring these records to the attention of more journalists.
Well, you mentioned it's Jazz Record Day. Let's touch on that for a moment. During our tenure, Howard and I, we've seen the disappearance largely of record stores. And each large city usually has one place. Since you're in Chicago, Howard's recently returned to Chicago. Talk to me a little bit about the Jazz Record Mart. Let's give them some recognition there.
Well, I mean, the Jazz Record Mart is where I was born as a jazz fan, basically. I discovered it on my 17th birthday. I saw an ad in the Chicago Daily News that they were having a record sale. I was already interested in jazz a little bit, and I went down to this record store, which was just a very teeny, dusty storefront in downtown Chicago, and I just fell in love with this place. I mean, it was so fascinating. It was like being in library stacks, because, you know, you'd read the back of the record, you'd talk to other people there, you'd hear, they would play records, of course, they'd have something on all the time. If you wanted to hear something and check it out, they would play it for you. The clerks were very knowledgeable. The store has moved several times since then. I mean, that was a while ago. But it still exists as a place where jazz fans gather. They talk to each other. They've got intelligent clerks who really understand the background of the music. It's a place to have a course in music appreciation, in jazz. You can learn, and also blues. Also sells books, probably T-shirts too. I don't think I've ever bought a T-shirt there because my money goes to the books and records. But I also worked at the Record Mart. I hung around there for 4 years, sweeping up and talking to Big Joe Williams, who was sitting at the door. He was basically the doorman. And Hank the Crank was a crazy washboard player who would tell riddles. It was a place where just characters came. I met Junior Wells there, Kala Purusha, Alfred Difta, the AACM tenor saxophonist, Jimmy Dawkins, because it was also the home of the Delmark Records. So a lot of people, the musicians who were on Delmark, would come in to pick up royalty checks or something from Bob Kester. Bob Kester, by the way, is one of the people that the JJA has recognized as a jazz hero for his good works, both retail and having Delmark Records. So the Record Mart is a hub, you know, and I've done a reading for my book, Future Jazz, there when it was first published. Joseph Jarman played a solo concert, and then I did a reading. My heart is at the Record Mart, you know, what can I say?
Well, if you're watching us live or a delay here on Saturday, please go to your local record store and support the ones that are left. As Howard's mentioned, it's a wonderful source of information and community. Although we have social media today, we have Facebook and Twitter and all the other variations of that. Nothing like face-to-face, nothing like being in a record store, having someone recommend some music, hearing it and talking about it. Right, Howard?
Right. And I mean, the other thing that was great about the record store at that time, the Record Mart, is that Jim DeJong, who I'm still very friendly with, a good buddy of mine, taught me a lot about listening. But he was making clippings, and he was cutting out everything about information of jazz in Chicago. He was really a hub of information. And for the listings, like in the Chicago Daily News and the Sun-Times, they would call him and say, well, what's happening in jazz this week? That was a regular function that he, as a clerk, contributed to the jazz scene. So it has many waves of impact besides just selling records.
Yeah. Now, one of the ways that many of us also hear about the music is through our journalists. And one of the categories in this year's awards, and has been since the beginning, is the Lifetime Achievement in Jazz Journalism.
Right.
Three of our friends here, Mark Myers, Ted Pankin, and Neil Tesser, have been nominated this year. Howard, who's some of the previous winners in this category?
I must admit, I've gotten this award also. Dan Morgenstern, Ira Gittler, Nat Hentoff, Bill Gottlieb, photographer, Willard Jenkins, Leroy Jones, Mira Baraka. We have not had a woman win that award yet, I'm sorry to say. And I think that I want to encourage the membership to look beyond the people who are only writing, because we also have publishers in this. Sheldon Meyer, editor at Oxford University Press, I think was not showing up in the Lifetime Achievement for Jazz Journalism, so we made him an A-team member, a jazz hero one year. But best recognized Bob Blumenthal, most of the older veteran jazz journalists have won this award. Doug Ramsey, I'm forgetting the name of my friend in Los Angeles.
Don Heckman?
Don Heckman, yes, thank you. He's won this. So there have been 15 or 16.
Yeah. Well, one of the previous winners and one of our more respected elders is Ira Gittler. We want to send out a shout out to Ira. Ira's had some health issues, but we love you, Ira. And I can't tell you how many liner notes in my life I picked up, and there's Ira right on the back of the cover.
and producing those records too. You know, he was major at Prestige, an important guy. I should say Gary Giddens also has won the Lifetime Achievement Award in jazz journalism. We've had some good, you know, to me, I mean, you know, I'm thoroughly steeped in this as a profession. That's why I do the JJA. I think that it's important that we have people talking about, writing about, making photographs about, now doing video, now being online. All of these ways of talking about jazz, and it's our culture. It's not just, oh, this is music we like. This is a whole lifestyle and a value system and a way of communication, and it's an American thing. And it's not only promoted by corporations. It is actually a grassroots cultural manifestation. To me, it's one of the most important things about America and the world. I think it's an American product that we've gifted to the rest of the world, and they've picked it up for their own usages. I think that's great. And we're getting to hear things that come from other countries and realizing what the values are there too. But this is to me bedrock, you know? I mean, when I was a kid, I thought, well, I want to write about culture for a living. And I thought, I like books. Well, I just haven't read that deeply yet or that widely. I love movies, but there are plenty of people writing about movies. I love rock and roll, but gee, I cannot get myself excited about rock and roll the way some of these rock writers can. I mean, they just go off and to me, there's this other music that's not being really talked about, and it's happening like right around us. And I can talk about that, you know, so it led me into that. And then I realized there are several hundred people, maybe it's a couple thousand people who are doing this professionally in the US, and I want to know them. We can argue, we can hang out, we can go hear music together, we can steal each other's girlfriends. I don't know, there's lots that we can do together. And it's been great.
And what is the website for the Jazz Journalists Association?
JJAnews.org. JJAnews.org.
Okay. Let's move over to jazz publication. Of course, we have our long-standing journals of record, Downbeat and Jazz Times. There a third nomination this year for a publication a lot of people don't know about. Howard, what is the New York City Jazz Record?
The New York City Jazz Record is a free monthly newspaper that is the most exhaustive single city publication that I know of. It's about jazz. It has the best listings that are compiled by Andre Henkin, who's one of the editors. It has very good writing. People like Kurt Gottschalk, David Adler are frequently in there, Russ Musto. And it's a comprehensive guide to what's going on every month. Shows up in the jazz clubs and the record stores. I want to say shout out to Downtown Music Gallery, which is the New York City equivalent of the Jazz Record Mart in Chicago. So you can pick up the New York City Jazz Record there. The other editor is Lawrence Donahue Green, who's also on the ballot committee for the Jazz Awards. Good eye. He's the guy I depend upon to do all my proofreading and get all that stuff right. And these guys, again, it's just a grassroots effort. It must be going on 15 years of existence now. They haven't missed a month. They do some pretty imaginative things, but you know, far from being innovative journalism, it's just solid mainstream journalism about our music. Profiles, record reviews, there's some historical writing, good analysis.
Now, the Jazz Book of the Year category, it's interesting. There are 3 biographies or autobiographies this year. There's Herbie Hancock's autobiography, Possibilities, a book about the wonderful vocalist Sheila Jordan, jazz child, and then Art Pepper's widow, Lori Pepper, wrote a book about art, Why I Stuck with a Jazz Junkie, Inventing a Marriage. Why do you think, excuse me, why do you think the bios place so highly in the nominations this year?
Well, again, it's the artists themselves are of interest to the membership. And so rather than the members reading somebody else's interviews with a group of artists, compilations like that, or an analysis, theoretical book, academic study, we want to learn something about the people we're listening to. And Lori Pepper This is her second volume about Art Pepper. I haven't read that one yet. And I haven't read Herbie's, which I'm eager to do. And I was sort of surprised that George Benson's bio didn't score highly. I actually worked a little bit with Ellen Johnson on her Sheila Jordan biography. That's not an autobiography. It is not an as told to. Ellen did the writing and the research herself, interviewing Sheila. She had really good access to Sheila. Sheila certainly collaborated in that way. She was open. But Ellen ran into some things that Sheila didn't want to talk about either. So I kind of mentored her on that and told her whatever I could about publishing and about self-promotion. Because that book is on Scarecrow Press, which is associated with the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers. And they have a large catalog of jazz biographies and jazz books, but they don't have much in the way of promotional muscle.
Now let's talk about the presentation of the awards. Will there be an event this year that awards will be presented? Will they be announced online? How are the winners going to be rolled out, Howard?
Well, the winners for the instrumental categories will be announced online on May 15th. We'll also put out a press release. Jim Igo will send out a press release about it. And usually an AP article goes out and gets some good placement all over the country about the winners of the awards. But those are only for the musical categories. And then the jazz journalist categories will be announced at the JJA's New York City Media Party, which will be June 16th at the Blue Note. 3:30 to 5:30. That's a ticketed event. We'll have music there, food, a lot of schmoozing, and I don't have all the details on that party yet, such as where you go to buy tickets and who's performing. I mean, we have that information, but we haven't divulged it. But the interesting thing about the presentation of the Musicians Awards is that a couple of years ago we decided that instead of asking the musicians to come to our party at the Blue Note and give them the awards there, that we would present the statuettes, engraved statuettes, at the musicians' own gigs all around the country. So we're taking that honor and giving it to them in front of their own audiences. And it disseminates, again, like you'd mentioned, that it's good to get the emphasis about jazz outside New York City. We think that's very important, decentralizing the mythology that jazz is only in New York. It's all over the country, and these musicians are playing all over the country. Let's show the honor that the JJA has to them on their stages. And we also have JJA members all over the country, so that gives those members an opportunity to stand up and be seen by their local readers or viewers, listeners. And I like that program. It is an effort. It's energy intensive on the JJ's very small staff. But
how small is that staff?
Well, there's me, and I work like 24/7. And then we have two people who are paid quarter-time work, quarter-time fees to do half-time work, which they do full-time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a jazz thing. You know, we're a very small, lean organization. Almost all of our infrastructure is online. We do not maintain any real estate. We don't have equipment other than what I use personally, and my staffers the same way. We use the least expensive and most public-friendly online formats and platforms to do our business, and that's the way we've been able to survive for 26 years now.
Well, it's a formula that's obviously worked. So JJJ Jazz Awards.
JJA Jazz Awards.
JJA
Jazz Awards.
I'll flash the URL when I put this up. But closing out here, I just wanted to say that Howard has recently returned to Chicago after a number of decades in New York, and this year is the anniversary of a very special organization, that those of us who've been around for a while know about and celebrate, and are so glad that they're still here. Howard, could you talk a little bit about this year's celebration of the AACM?
Well, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, I mean, I feel so glad. This is really an organization that started in 1965. So this is its 50th anniversary. And I've been following it and the musicians there since 1967. So I was really lucky to get turned on to this music really early. And actually the JJA is built on the model that the AACM proposed for a artist-run organization. But the musicians who come out of the AACM are just an extraordinary group of innovative individualists. And I think that that's the point of any of these kinds of organizations. We don't want to enforce a doctrine. We don't want to tell people how they should be writing or what they should be broadcasting about. We want to support their individual efforts. That's the JJA. That's also the AACM. So from the AACM, you've got Henry Threadgill, Anthony Braxton, Roscoe Mitchell, the Art Ensemble of Chicago. Today, people like Mike Reed, D. Alexander, Greg Ward, Wada Bowden, brilliant people who are making extraordinary music. Nicole Mitchell, and have influenced groups to do similar things in St. Louis, in the Bay Area, in Austin for a while, all over the place. So it's an extraordinary model. And to me, I don't know of another arts organization, nonprofit, artist-run organization in any genre that has lasted for 50 years in America. I think this is extraordinary accomplishment. And I've been really lucky recently. I've been covering some of the AACM activities. Jack DeJohnette's Made in Chicago Quintet. I went to hear them in Minneapolis. I've done an NPR piece about them, which I hope will air next week. I just published had published by The Wire, the British magazine, a cover story about Roscoe Mitchell. I'll be writing for Downbeat about the AACM's 50th anniversary activities. They're having museum exhibitions. There's one up right now at the DuSable Museum in Chicago. There's going to be another one that opens this summer at the Museum of Contemporary Art to show the impact and the spread of effect that AACM musicians have had on visual arts, literary arts, poets, dancers. Certainly they've been influential on something like the Vision Festival, the creation of that. And so it's the AACM to me is just something that's carried me along, because the fascination with the innovation and the idea that we're making original music, we're not looking backwards, we're trying to discover what's next. That's what's so exciting about jazz, and the people in this organization personify that.
Absolutely. And for me, another word that applies to this organization is integrity. This isn't a faceless corporation looking for profits. These are rugged individualists who embody everything that jazz is about, as does my friend Howard Mandel,
Oh, well,
Jazz Journalists Association.
Yeah,
I'll look forward to that check tomorrow, Howard. But please jump over to jjajazzawards.org. And thank you so much for taking time on our busy schedule to join us, Howard.
Thanks for having me, Brett. Great to talk to you. And thanks for what you're doing to promote jazz all over the place, too. And the Jazz Video Guy is an essential member of our community. And really, you are eligible and should be considered for that Lifetime Achievement Award, I should say.
Well, I'm too young for that. Let's wait a little while.
Okay, a little longer.
In any event, thanks, Howard, and we'll see you next time.